August Reed, 1941. Bethpage, Long Island. A heavy, odd-looking prototype rolls and lifts into the warm summer air. In the cockpit sits Chief Engineer Robert Hall. On the ground, a few Navy men shake their heads. Too big, too slow, too complicated. They call it the Turkey. They laugh a little. They don't know yet. They don't know this ugly machine will go on to sink more enemy warships than any other American aircraft in history. They don't know it will change how the Navy fights. They don't know it will bring home crews that in any other aircraft would never return. We call it the Avenger. And this is its story. Let's rewind. In March 1939, the Navy admits a hard truth. Their torpedo bomber, the TBD Devastator, is already old. They want a new airplane, fast, with a list of demands that sounds impossible. 3-man crew, 300 miles per hour, 1,000 miles of range, all weapons inside a bomb bay, armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and a powered turret on top that actually works. 13 companies try. It comes down to 2. Vought's XTBU looks sleek. Grumman's XTBF looks like someone inflated their Wildcat fighter until it bulged. The Navy picks Vought first, but Vought is drowning in Corsair orders. They can't deliver. The contract moves to Grumman. Now the ugly one must be built on a deadline that makes people sweat. Engineer Robert Hall looks at the requirement sheet. Everything the Navy wants adds weight. Weight means more structure, more systems, more things to break. The bomb bay alone is a headache, big enough for a 2,000-pound Mark 13 torpedo, or 4 500-pound bombs, or depth charges, or mines. The doors must work in salt spray, at high G, and while being shot at. Then the turret. Past turrets failed. Too slow, too fragile, too messy. Grumman bets on an electric turret. If the power fails, the gunner is stuck. But if it works, it will track faster and break less. Next problem. Wings. Carriers are small. Hangar decks and elevators are smaller. The Avenger's wings are huge, over 54 feet. How do you fold them smaller without snapping their backbone? Leroy Grumman sits in a meeting, plays with a pink eraser and paper clips, and finds the solution. A clever double hinge fold that swings the wings up and back at the same time. It cuts the span to about 18 feet. The stow-wing is born. Simple idea. Brilliant result. Heavy mechanism, yes, but it works, and it works at sea. Now the engine. Wright R2600, 14 cylinders. Owned 700 horsepower at first, later more. A monster for its time, but the airplane is a monster too. Empty, it's over 5 tons. Loaded for combat, it's far more. The biggest single-engine Navy aircraft anyone has seen. People start calling it names. The pregnant beast. The Turkey. It stings, December 30th, 1940. The Navy orders 286 planes, before the prototype even flies. The clock is ticking. Then August 1st, 1941, the first flight. It flies. It's not graceful. It's stable but heavy on the controls. The pilot sits high, but visibility still isn't great. It feels like driving a truck, but the systems work. The bay works. The turret works. The fold works. Then, November 28, 1941. Disaster. The first prototype catches fire over Long Island. Bob Hall and Gordon Israel bail out. The plane burns into the ground. Critics shout, "Too complex! Too many failure points! Cancel it!" Grumman pushes harder. The second prototype is ready. Production moves. On January 3, 1942, less than a month after Pearl Harbor, the first production Avenger rolls out. By early June, over 100 are delivered, and now midway. 6 brand new Avengers reach Pearl Harbor just after the carriers sail. Volunteers step forward anyway. They fly to Midway Island to join the defense. June 4, 1942. Dawn. 6 Avengers launch from Midway's strip to attack the Japanese fleet. They fly low. They fly straight. That's what a torpedo run requires. And the Zero fighters fall on them like wolves. The Avenger has a 50 in the turret and a 30 low in the belly. It's not enough against fast fighters with cannons. One by one, the Avengers take hits. One by one, they fall. Only one comes back, flown by Ensign Albert Burt Ernest. His turret gunner is dead. His radio man, just 17, is bleeding. The cockpit is splashed with blood. The instruments are wrecked. The hydraulic system is gone. The electrical system spits smoke. The engine is chewed by cannon shells. But the Avenger keeps flying. Self-sealing tanks keep it from burning. Armor behind the pilot keeps him alive. The big radio keeps turning. Ernest bellies the airplane into midway. 2 survivors climb out. Engineers count the holes later. At least 9 20mm shells and 60+ machine gun hits. Any normal airplane would have torn apart. This one brought 2 men home. Midway is a victory, but not for torpedo planes. Old Devastators are wiped out. The Avengers lose 5 of 6. Many people say the Avengers a failure too, but the quiet men who study the wrecks see something else. A machine that soaks up punishment and refuses to die. Complexity, yes, but also layers of backup. Strength in the bones. Systems that keep working long enough to save you. Production speeds up. By August 1942, Avengers are in fleet squadrons. Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8, reforms after its terrible losses. Ernest returns, fights in the Solomons, earns another Navy Cross. The Eastern Solomons battle becomes the Avengers' first test, with more experience. 28 Avengers attack and sink the light carrier Ryujo. Losses are real, but crews learn. They learn how to take a beating and still fight back. They learn the turret can keep Zeros honest. They learn the long range makes new tactics possible. Then comes Guadalcanal at sea. A Japanese battleship is crippled in night fighting. Avengers finish it off with torpedoes. A strange, big plane that couldn't possibly work is now killing big ships. But the Avengers' most important work might be far from the Pacific headlines. Look to the Atlantic. German U-boats are sinking Allied ships faster than we can replace them. Escort carriers join the convoys, but they need the right plane. They need range. They need radar. They need a big bay for weapons. The Avenger is that plane. We bolt ASB radar under its wing or inside the bay. At night, in storms, in fog, the radar sees what eyes cannot. The Avenger stalks a U-boat on the surface, attacks with depth charges or rockets, forces it down. Once submerged, the sub is slow. The Avenger circles overhead, drops sonobuoys, calls in destroyers. If the sub tries to surface and run, the Avenger is waiting. From 1943 to 1945, Avengers help sink or share credit in dozens of U-boats. British carriers fly them too, calling them Tarpons at first, then Avengers. In total, when you count the Pacific, they take down around 30 submarines. No other aircraft type matches that record. The machine matures. Nearly 10,000 will be built by war's end. Most, surprisingly, are not made by Grumman. General Motors, yes, the car company, takes over as the main producer. Grumman hands GM a PK Avenger, held together with sheet metal screws so they can take it apart, study it, and learn to mass-produce it the automotive way. Even Leroy Grumman, who doubts a carmaker can build a warplane, is proven wrong. GM builds more than 3 times as many Avengers as Grumman. The TBM-3 arrives with a stronger engine, about 1,900 horsepower, and more fuel and electronics. Now, watch what happens in June 1944 at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Fighters smash the Japanese air arm in what pilots call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But late that day, Admiral Mark Mitcher orders a risky strike at extreme range. Hundreds of planes launch, knowing many will have to find their carriers in the dark. Avengers from Belleau Wood hit the light carrier Hio with torpedoes as daylight fades. Hio rolls and sinks. On the way home, fuel runs out. Darkness is total. Mitcher does something almost never done in wartime. He orders the whole fleet to turn on the lights, searchlights, signal lamps, even headlights on the flight decks to guide the boys in. The ocean glows with ships like floating cities. Many airplanes still ditch. Many crews are lost. But many more are saved. The lesson: The Avenger can fly long, fly heavy, fly in weather and darkness, and do it again the next day. October 1944. Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Over 200,000 men at sea. The Japanese throw in their whole fleet. 4 main fights spread across days and hundreds of miles. About 400 Avengers take part in different phases. At Samar, small escort carriers and a thin screen of destroyers, callsign Taffy 3, suddenly face a wall of Japanese battleships and cruisers at dawn. The Avengers on those little carriers were loaded for ground support, not ship killing. Many have no torpedoes. Some carry light bombs. It doesn't matter. They attack anyway. They make run after run, some dry, no ordnance left, just to draw fire and confuse the enemy. American destroyers charge battleships in suicidal torpedo attacks. Together, they convince Admiral Kurita he's facing full-size fleet carriers with full air groups. He turns away. Gambier Bay goes down, destroyers go down, but the invasion beach is saved. The Avengers, built to be torpedo bombers, prove they are also shields. The day before Samar, another giant meets its end. The super battleship Musashi, sister to Yamato, plows through the Sibuyan Sea. She's the biggest battleship ever built. Huge guns, thick armor, unsinkable, they say. American carriers send wave after wave. Bombs crash down. Torpedoes slam in from both sides. Avengers are part of every wave. Some reports say around a dozen or more torpedoes hit, plus many bombs. By evening, Musashi rolls and disappears under the waves. Over 1,000 of her crew are lost. The sky killed the Queen of the Sea, April 7, 1945, Yamato's last sortie. It's a one-way mission to Okinawa with barely enough fuel to reach the island. The American spotter, Admiral Mitcher, launches everything. Hundreds of planes, including nearly 150 Avengers, pour in. They coordinate torpedo attacks from port, then from starboard, forcing the big ship to list, then list the other way. Armor stops shells. It can't stop torpedoes below the waterline. Flooding spreads. Fires grow. Just before mid-afternoon, Yamato explodes in a massive cloud. Thousands die. The age of the battleship ends for good. Aircraft, many of them Avengers, write the last line. But here's the truth about the Avenger. Most of its missions are not famous ship kills. Most are the grind. Bombs and rockets against bunkers. Skip bombing against piers. Night patrols over black water with only a green radar screen for a friend. Long, boring searches that suddenly turn deadly. Cargo runs, mail runs, medevac flights. Search and rescue for downed pilots. Recon photos. Mine laying. The big bay that once held a torpedo now holds anything the day requires. The too complicated airplane proves to be the most flexible tool in the Navy's box. There's another story, too. One young pilot among many, George Herbert Walker Bush. He earns his wings at 18, the youngest Navy aviator at that time. He flies Avengers from the carrier San Jacinto. 58 combat missions. One day in 1944, his airplane is hit over Chichijima. The Avenger is on fire, but he finishes the bomb run. He heads out to sea so his crew won't fall into enemy hands on the island. He bails out. His crew doesn't make it. He drifts in a raft, bleeding, paddling as Japanese boats search for him. Hours later, a U.S. submarine surfaces and hauls him aboard. He will live to be a president. He will never forget the airplane that stayed in the air long enough to give him a chance. Statistics matter because each number stands for lives. Almost 10,000 Avengers built in a few years. Over 46,000 combat sorties. 729 combat losses. Far fewer than you might expect for a plane that flies low against ships and flak. The loss rate per sortie is among the lowest of the war for this kind of work. Why? Armor, self-sealing tanks, strong structure, redundant systems, an electric turret that keeps working, a wing fold that doesn't jam, a bomb bay that carries whatever the mission needs. All the extra weight the critics hated turns out to be life insurance. Compare it with the others. Japan's B-5N Kate that wrecked Pearl Harbor is fast for its time, but by 1943 it lacks armor and self-sealing tanks. It dies quickly in the new sky. Britain's Fairy Swordfish earns legend at Taranto and against Bismarck, but it survives only in special conditions. It's a fabric biplane in a metal world. America's Devastator is brave but outdated at Midway. Whole squadrons are wiped out. The Avenger flies the same kind of mission on the same day, under the same guns, and at least one comes home. That's not luck. That's design. Not every complex airplane succeeds. The SB-2C Helldiver is complex too, but pilots call it the Beast for the wrong reasons. Constant problems, rushed fixes. The Avenger's complexity has a different purpose. If one path fails, another takes over. If one system is shot away, a backup keeps you alive long enough to land on a strip or a deck. The Avenger's influence doesn't stop in 1945. Variants carry big radar sets and become early warning. Platforms, the ancestors of modern eyes in the sky. Others hunt submarines in the cold Atlantic with sonobuoys and magnetic detectors. Canada flies them into the 1960s. France flies them in Indochina. The Netherlands and Brazil fly them at sea. Japan's new post-war Navy flies them for patrol. It turns out the hard-to-maintain airplane of 1941 is, in practice, sturdy and straightforward for nations with small budgets and big oceans. People sometimes say the last aerial torpedo attack was done by Avengers. It wasn't. In Korea, 1951, Sky Raiders, successors to the Avenger, dropped the last aerial torpedoes against a dam. But that final page still reads like an Avenger chapter. Low, steady, precise, devastating. So, what is the Avenger, really? It is a set of ideas ahead of its time. A big internal bay that accepts many weapons without redesign. Today, we call that modular. An electric turret and more electric systems than usual. Today, everything is electric-driven. A design that puts crew survival high on the list. Today, that is standard. A frame that welcomes new electronics, radar, radios, sensors, without losing its balance. Today, that's how we build multi-role aircraft. It is also a lesson in production. In 3 years, America builds 9,236 of them. Car plants become airplane plants. Workers who built Chevrolets now build torpedo bombers. The pace is stunning. Over 200 per month at peaks. Grumman teaches GM how to do it by sending them a plane screwed together so they can take it apart. It's clever. It's humble. It works, and it is a human story. About 7:30 crews don't come home. That's thousands of family members who get a knock on the door. But because this machine is tough, because it has armor and backup lines and self-sealing tanks and strength in its bones, many more do come home. Pilots limp back with wings shredded and oil on the windshield, with hydraulics gone and gear that won't come down and a turret jammed at a strange angle. They land anyway. They climb out shaking. They write a letter. They fly again. By the numbers, the Avenger helps sink or finish off a staggering list. Carriers, battleships, including the 2 largest ever built cruisers, destroyers, submarines, and over 500,000. Then more. Tons of enemy shipping. By mission count, it bombs more than it torpedoes. By impact, it changes everything. It kills the myth of the invincible battleship. It proves the carrier is king. It shows that a barrel-bodied, overbuilt, overcomplicated airplane can be the sharpest knife in the drawer if its complexity is focused on one goal. Bring the crew to the target, do the job, and bring them home. After the war, survivors go quiet. Some sit in museums. Some fly at air shows. A few dozen are still around, some of them still airworthy. When one passes overhead, you hear the deep, steady thump of a big radio. You look up and see that thick fuselage, that high canopy, those wings that fold like elbows. It is not graceful. It is not sleek. It does not care. It was built to work. Think back to that first day in 1941, to the men on the ground who smirked. They saw an airplane that looked wrong. What they didn't see was the plan hidden inside. The backups, the armor, the bay, the fold, the turret, the range, the patience. They didn't see the submarines it would stalk in black water. They didn't see Musashi rolling over or Yamato blowing apart. They didn't see a young pilot named Bush floating on a raft because his Avenger stayed in the air long enough for a submarine to find him. War exposes truth. Pretty doesn't matter. Simple doesn't always survive. What matters is what works when everything goes wrong. The Avenger worked when everything went wrong. That is why, when we measure its success, we do count ships sunk and missions flown. But we also count something else: letters home, weddings after the war, children born because a crew walked away from a battered airplane that refused to fall, experience passed on to the next pilot because the last pilot lived to teach. The Avenger's greatest record is not only tonnage, it is lives saved by design. In the end, the airplane they called too heavy, too slow, too complicated, was none of those things in the way that counts. It was strong. It was steady. It was ready. It did its job in every role we asked of it. It rewrote the rules of naval warfare not with elegance, but with endurance. It kept a promise. Take us there, let us fight, and bring us home, and more often than not, it did. But our story isn't finished. The Avenger's power wasn't only in battle. It also lived in the small human moments that made the big victories possible. Picture a cold dawn on an escort carrier in the North Atlantic. The deck is wet. The ship heaves in gray waves. Below, a young radio man warms his hands over a coffee mug as the plane captain checks the Avenger's tires with a gloved thumb. A chief petty officer runs a finger along the propeller leading edge, feeling for nicks. The turret gunner swings his seat, testing the electric drive. The pilot leans into the cockpit, breath fogging the glass, and murmurs to himself, "Batteries, on. Magnetos, both. Prime. Clear." He hits the starter. The R-2600 coughs, shakes, and then settles into that deep, steady thrum. You feel it in your ribs more than you hear it. The crew buckles in. The deck officer points, and the Avenger crawls forward into the wind, the ocean a steel sheet beyond the bow. They are not hunting glory today. They are hunting a dot on a radar scope. Hours later, they find it. The radar shows a return where empty sea should be. The pilot drops to wave-top height. Spray stripes the windscreen. The gunner calls, "Wake ahead, 2 o'clock." A U-boat on the surface, charging batteries, crewmen scrambling for the deck gun. The Avenger lines up. Depth charges tumble from the bay and kick up white pillars. The submarine noses under. The Avenger circles and drops sonobuoys, listening to faint metal echoes in a cold world no human can see. A destroyer escort miles away turns hard and comes racing. The Avenger doesn't claim the kill. It claims the contact. It pins the enemy to a place in the ocean until help arrives. Hours of boredom, minutes of terror, and one disciplined attack. This is how convoys lived to see another sunrise. Now shift to the Pacific again. A tiny coral strip on an island with a name most Americans cannot pronounce. Midday heat shimmers. 2 sailors slam new 50 cal belts into the turret cans. A mechanic, bare-chested and sunburned, lies on the wing, arms buried up to the elbow in an open panel, tightening a stubborn fitting with a wrench he stole from the engine shop because it just fits better. He says to the plane captain below, "Run the flap again." The flap groans down, then up. Again, down, then up. "All right, tell the skipper he's good." The pilot jogs over, helmet in hand, and gives the man on the wing a quick, crooked grin. No salute, no speech. Just a shared look that means, "I will bring this machine back to you if I can." That quiet pact between the men who fly and the men who keep the airplanes flying was one of the Avenger's secret strengths. Complex machines need careful hands. Grumman built parts you could reach without tearing half the fuselage open. They put access doors where they were needed. The wiring looms were labeled. The turret had inspection points. Yes, it was a lot of systems, but it was systems you could get to and fix on a hot, windy deck with a toolbox and some cross-threaded hope. The airplane had a reputation among enlisted men. Heavy, yes, tricky sometimes, but honest. You did your checklist, it did its job. Listen to a pilot's debrief after a strike on a harbor in the Philippines. His voice is flat, tired, simple. We went in at 1200. Flak was heavy over the pier. I put the sight on the warehouse. First pass, 2 500s out, walked them to the roofline. Came around again. Rockets this time. Saw splinters pop from the target. Turret was hot with tracers. The electric held fine. Took a hit in the starboard flap. We compensated. Oil temp came up. We gave the beach one more rattle on the way out. Hung the gear until short final, then dropped. She caught 3 wire, no bounce. Crew's fine. Airplane's bleeding, but she'll live. That tone, no drama, no color, was the sound of a tool used well. A different voice belongs to an Avenger gunner who kept a diary his grandson would one day read. His entry is short. Zeros came in from the sun. Pilot skidded us hard left. I tracked one and led him a wing and a half. Fired 3 bursts. He wobbled, then peeled off trailing smoke. I felt bad after. Not right away. Later. I always feel bad later. War asks young people to do things that change them. The Avenger did not make those choices easy. It simply gave those young people more chances to come home and feel the weight of them in peacetime. There is also the story of the men who did not come back, but because of the Avenger, left a trace strong enough to save others. A maintenance log notes, left main spar nick, probable cannon strike, repaired by splice. The squadron copies the fix to a bulletin board. Another crew's mishap, gear collapse on rollout, leads to a new procedure. 1 extra pump on emergency hydraulics if line pressure spikes. A radar operator's trick, tune gain down when close to rain squalls, gets added to pre-mission briefs. This is how a squadron grows smarter. Not from manuals alone, but from bent metal and surviving to talk about it. You can measure the Avenger's impact in ships sunk and sorties flown. But you can also measure it in these small, transferable lessons. How to fold wings quickly without trapping a hand. How to safety pin a turret before you stand up. How to stow a raft where a bleeding pilot can reach it. How to fly blacked out and still find your way back to a deck lit only at the last possible second. The airplane taught these lessons because it kept living long enough for people to pass them on. Late in the war, another change comes quietly. Night work becomes routine. Avengers launch into darkness with a radar scope glowing pale green, a thin line sweeping, a blip blooming here and there. The pilot flies by instruments. The radio man reads bearings in a calm voice. The gunner, hunched behind the sights, watches the black sky, eyes watering in the wind. They are not heroes in these hours. They are craftsmen. They are doing exact work with a heavy tool in an unforgiving place. When they return, the deck crew guides them with wands and shouted numbers that the wind steals. Hook down, throttle back. A slam, a screech, the smell of burnt rubber, and then silence. A hand slaps the fuselage twice. Chalks in. After the war, many Avengers go to boneyards. A few are sold to small nations that need patrol aircraft. Some are converted for firefighting, carrying slurry in their big bellies and dropping red clouds over burning timber in the American West. It is a strange second life, the same strong body, the same big doors, now serving forests instead of fleets. A pilot who never saw the Pacific learns the feel of the Avenger's heavy wing as he turns along a ridge and drops a line to save a town. He climbs out after a long day smelling of smoke and oil and thinks, whoever built this thing understood work. Decades pass. Kids in ball caps stand behind a rope at an air show. A restored Avenger taxis by. The pilot in the cockpit is gray at the temples. He waves. The engine sound is old music. The wing fold is a trick that never grows old. The crowd claps when the big panels tuck themselves up like a bird at rest. Somewhere in that crowd, an old man goes quiet. He does not clap. He remembers a different deck, a different sea, and a different set of young faces turning toward a catapult. He is grateful the airplane came back, and sorry that some of those faces did not. If you walk around one of these restored aircraft, you see details that tell you what kind of war it fought. Armor plate behind the seat. A tiny crank handle where a mechanic could move a jammed component by inches. A turret ring that still turns smooth. Ribs and stringers thick enough to make a modern engineer frown, and a wartime crewman nod. A placard, worn smooth by hands, that says in plain words how to get out in a hurry. You also see the bay. It is huge, it is clean. It is honest about what it is for. Many airplanes hide their purpose behind curves and polish. The Avenger never bothered. It put its work in the middle and built a strong house around it. There is a reason this ugly machine kept being asked to do one more job. It was not fast like a fighter. It was not graceful like a twin-engine bomber, but it could take almost any load we needed to carry, almost any route we needed to fly, almost any damage the enemy could do, and still finish the mission. In war, almost any is gold. Let's end with 3 short scenes, true in spirit, and told the way men who were there remembered them. First, a deck at dusk, Philippine Sea. The call comes down the line. Lights on. The ocean blooms with impossible brightness. The Avenger's pilot is low on fuel and lower on hope. He sees a rectangle of yellow against black water. A carrier has lit her deck like a city street. He lines up and tells his crew, "We're going home." He is shaking. He does not stop shaking until he is in his bunk hours later, boots still on. Second, the Sibuyan Sea. The Avenger dives through broken clouds. A mountain of ship fills the windscreen, Musashi, shouldering forward, her guns flashing. The pilot holds his breath without meaning to. He releases at the mark. The airplane leaps when the torpedo drops. He hauls the nose left and skims a wake where tracers stitch water into foam. Years later, he will tell his grandson only this: it was like trying to punch a cliff. Third, the North Atlantic. Winter. The Avenger's cockpit is a freezer. The radio man's fingers are numb inside his gloves. The radar shows a return that will not fade. The pilot turns again and again until the destroyer's bow wave appears on the horizon, lifting like a white blade. The destroyer dips its flag once to the airplane overhead. The Avenger's crew salutes back, though no one can see it. The U-boat captain, miles below, listens to screws and wonders if this time he will surface again. He will not. These are not tales of a pretty airplane. They are tales of a faithful one. When we look for the meaning in the Avenger's record, we find 2 truths. The first is technical. Survivability and flexibility win long wars. The second is human. The right tool, in steady hands, gives courage room to work. The men who designed the Avenger with erasers and paperclips were not building a monument. They were making a promise. The pilots and crews who took that promise to sea kept it, one launch at a time. The deck crews and mechanics kept it with safety wire and sore backs. The factories kept it with night shifts and fast learning. The Navy kept it with hard lessons turned into better tactics. And the airplane itself kept it with thick bones and systems that did not give up in the dark. Sometimes the world is saved by elegance. Sometimes it is saved by endurance. The Avenger chose endurance. It was big, it was busy, it was blunt, and it brought them home. If you ever hear that deep radial echo across an airfield and look up to see that barrel-back shape against the sun, think of August 3rd, 1941, when men laughed at an airplane that looked wrong. Think of Midway, where one came back when it should not have. Think of gray seas with white wakes that ended quietly because a patient crew found a dot on a green screen. Think of a super battleship rolling over while small airplanes turned the tide of a century. Then, think of the last line in many squadron diaries, the line that mattered more than tonnage or targets hit. Crew returned.